you a blockbuster Friday night trade as The Athletic reports that the New York Knicks have agreed to a deal to acquire Karl-Anthony Towns from the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Knicks will be sending back a package that includes Julius Randle and DiVincenzo. Towns has spent his entire 9-year career in Minnesota, averaging over 20 points per game for the last 8 seasons, and last season helped lead the T-Wolves to the Western Conference Finals. And for more on this shocking news, we bring in CBS Sports NBA insider Bill Ryder. And Bill, I don't know about you, but I was sitting there in the control room thinking, oh, this is a great Friday night. I'm going to see if Miami's going to get upset by Virginia Tech. Then all of a sudden, I see the report. And I literally had to look at it for like 10 seconds. Is this real? Did they really make this trade? So from your perspective, what was your reaction seeing this news?
Yeah, first reaction is yours, Chris. It's a jaw dropper. It's a shocker. It'll wake you up on a Friday night, especially on the East Coast, where it's a little bit later than out here in L.A. And then with a little chance to sort of try to process it, it at least fits some of the talk around the NBA. Certainly in Minnesota, there were a lot of concerns about their financial flexibility going forward with the second apron and the massive contracts they've already put out there and that they're going to have to. There's also an ownership battle. Who's going to control that team in a lawsuit that's underway? So some questions about whether or not there's just going to be the money to finance the team as it is. So this creates some financial flexibility. And for the Knicks, there's certainly been some rumblings that they had come to the conclusion, as much as having Julius Randle back in the mix would be great, they had a great season last year largely without him. They made that run through the postseason without him. And so it's a shocker, but it sort of makes sense from a Timberwolves perspective because this gives them some financial flexibility and a little more depth. They were sort of handcuffed with what they could do. And for New York City and for the Knicks, I like it for both teams, Chris, but I love it for New York because Julius Randle is someone they thought maybe they could do without. And they get, obviously, they're losing DiVincenzo, which is a big loss. But Cat is such an offensive boost to a team that's already stocked up and loaded and looked like a contender before this trade in the Eastern Conference.
So when it comes to the Knicks, right, and how they stack up against the Celtics, who won the NBA title this year, does this move inch them closer to being right there on the doorstep or looking eye to eye with Boston? Because on the other side, Bill, we talked about it off camera, Karl-Anthony Towns, you know, defense, that's not his calling card. His calling card is to be able to stretch the floor, right? He can really shoot. He can also take you off the dribble. But defensively, with Tom Thibodeau, Tom Thibodeau is defense.
You better do it.
You know?
Yeah. No, you said it like he can, and I'll say it, he doesn't. And with Tibbs, it's he better. It's a gamble. I think it's a really impressive gamble. To answer your question, I do think, yes, when you have an arms race, when you have somebody pulling away in a competitive circumstance, and that's the Boston Celtics, and let the Sixers in too. We'll see what they do and what they're about. But bringing in Paul George was a huge move by Daryl Morey. You got to respond if you want to be in that sort of at that level. And the Knicks have done that. They did it with Bridges, and they do it again with Cat. So yes, I think that they're on the level, Chris, with Boston at least on paper. Now you don't win championships on paper. Ask the Boston Celtics. It took a lot of heartbreak and a lot of near misses and a finals appearance a couple of years ago where they didn't succeed to kind of get there as a team. But on paper, I think that this gives the New York Knicks the firepower to compete with anybody in the Eastern Conference. And if they can figure it out, part of that being the defensive realities for Cat and what that head coach wants in New York, I think they can compete with anybody in the NBA now.
So Knicks fans certainly love hearing that, and of course they definitely want Cat to embody what Tibbs wants in terms of their defensive identity. When you look in the Western Conference with the T-Wolves, right, and how this changes the way we look at them, what do you think this does for their chances to get to an NBA Finals, knowing all the pros and cons that Julius Randle brings to the team? And then also, you got DiVincenzo, so that adds some defensive levitility.
I'm going to give you my first reaction, and I can tell you the people I know in that Timberwolves organization are going to probably tell me I'm wrong, and so maybe they'll talk me into a different perspective tomorrow because I haven't talked to them this evening, Chris. My first perspective is it's a really nice move for the Timberwolves in the medium term and maybe the long term, financial flexibility. I love DiVincenzo as an added piece and a competitor and some depth. But I think it's a minor setback in the short term. They are a little bit less impressive, a little bit less dangerous at the 4. As you noted, there are some questions with Julius Randle, and I think this just reflects the fact that they are going to build this team in the long term. We knew this around Anthony Edwards and around a player that can be they think, and I think we all agree, I certainly do, a top 5, top 3 player in the NBA going forward. So short term, on paper, Chris, I don't think they're as dangerous. Certainly they're starting 5 as they were. But Julius Randle is obviously offensively a weapon that you can use. We've seen him be pretty impressive when he's healthy. That Timberwolves coaching staff believes that they can take guys like this and improve them a little bit. They'll point to a guy like Naz Reid. And I think DiVincenzo is an addition in terms of shooting, in terms of athleticism, in terms of winning, in terms of defense, that they're going to like in that mix. So I think the Timberwolves take a small step back maybe this year. They're still obviously one of the top 3, 4 teams. I think it's 3 in the Western Conference, but it gives them some depth and it gives them some flexibility to try to maintain this level for the long term.
So with that being said, long term, looking at both teams, who do you think has the edge in this one? Because it's not like all these players just came from college, right? They have a lot of years on them. Maybe not to the level of KD, Steph Curry, right, LeBron James, but they have picked up some miles in this game.
Look, I think it's the Knicks. Look, I think both teams can win this trade. And I know that Cat is, what is he, 29 years old? He's got 3 years left on his contract. And it's the financial realities of the new CBA are really restrictive when you have a bunch of guys. The Knicks are all in. They are all in. But, I mean, look at that. Look at that starting 5 right there. I think that for the New York Knicks, this year, next year, maybe the year after that, the duration of Towns' contract, it makes them a team that should and I think will compete at the highest levels in the NBA. I think New York wins the trade if we're looking for a winner. And I think for the Timberwolves, it's TBD, but I don't hate it for them either.
Bill Ryder breaking down the latest, a shocking trade. Donte DiVincenzo, Julius Randle going to Minnesota in exchange for Karl-Anthony Towns coming to the Big Apple. What a development, Bill. We always appreciate the insight. And this was Karl-Anthony Towns before the trade had been announced. So he probably knew. ... Pretty safe to say, maybe not so happy with that move, but that's the business of the NBA. Star players get traded left and right, and they have to adjust to their new environment.
Went away from clinching the NL West for a 3rd year in a row and for the 11th time in the last 12 years. Bottom 7, Dodgers down 2-0. Man on for Will Smith. .50 season, 400 total bases. Dodgers have a 1-game lead on the Phillies for the best.
So the other night, moments after Shohei Ohtani had become the first player ever to go 50-50, 50-plus homers, 50-plus steals in one season, I recorded a video with a stunned and potentially knee-jerk overreaction that the case had just been closed, that Shohei's the baseball GOAT. My man Deion Sanders backed me up the other day when he said, and I quote, "Ohtani, he's incredible, man. You can compare him to the Jordans and the Tom Bradys of the world. That's who he is. He's doing things we haven't fathomed," said Deion Sanders, who did start in center field and bat leadoff for those teams that I previously mentioned. Deion knows what he's talking about when it comes to baseball. And yes, sir, Ohtani is doing things we have not fathomed. He's about to win his third MVP in 4 seasons. And of course, when his arm has been healthy, the man has gone 38-19 as a pitcher, including an ERA right at 3. In 2022, he finished 4th in the Cy Young race with an ERA of 2.33. Extraordinary. And he's now stolen 55 bases at 6 feet 4 inches tall and 210 pounds. And he, who knows, may wind up leading the league in homers for a second straight year. Lord have mercy. No player has ever been this all-around versatile. I mean, Babe Ruth couldn't run. Barry Bonds didn't have much of an arm. Ohtani is actually what you'd call a six-tool player, maybe the first ever six-tool player. He can throw from deep right field to third base, and he can pitch. Top 5 pitcher pitch. Ohtani is definitely the tools GOAT. But here's where I overreacted. Conclusion jumped. I wasn't thinking at that crazy moment, that goosebumps moment, that Shohei Ohtani has never played in the postseason. Not a single swing, not a single pitch. As you probably know, I'm all about the playoffs, the money games, the ones that really matter. Now, do I think Ohtani will be great when it matters most? I do. But he's now the best player on the Dodger team favored to win it all. Time to back that up. Maybe time for me to calm down just a little, just for a moment. So this is what's dawned on me. Identifying the baseball GOAT is way, way more complicated than concluding Michael Jordan, obviously, and Tom Brady, obviously. The problem is the most valuable players in baseball are starting pitchers who can pitch only every 5th or 6th or sometimes even 7th day, unless they're Ohtani or Babe Ruth. So baseball was my first love when I was a kid, but Babe Ruth was even before my time. So I did read some written for kids biography of the Babe. It really didn't do his career much justice, and not until last night did I look hard at what he accomplished. Of course, until Hank Aaron came along, Ruth was obviously the greatest home run hitter ever, finished with 714. But I did not realize that Babe Ruth pitched Boston to 3 World Series titles, pitched them to the titles. In 2 World Series, he went 3-0 with an 0.87 ERA. He also led the league in ERA 1 year, along with going 23-12. Whew. Whoa. Wow. Yet, as you know, Babe Ruth did not have to compete against Black or Latin players. And as you probably know, Babe Ruth was a fat guy. So for me, those 2 factors somehow always disqualified him from being in the GOAT debate. Which brings me to Barry Bonds. I had the honor and privilege of covering Michael Jordan in Chicago and Barry Bonds in San Francisco. Barry Bonds was the greatest hitter ever. Ain't even close. The only hitter who ever had the advantage over the pitcher. While Barry was winning 5 MVPs in San Francisco to go along with the 2 that he won previously in Pittsburgh, Barry Bonds shattered Roost's single-season records for walks and intentional walks and on-base percentage. That's because nobody would pitch to Barry Bonds. He'd only see, and I was at many of these games, maybe a couple of hittable pitches a night, and he would invariably hit those hard, either off or over the wall. And yes, I know all about the performance-enhancing drugs. Barry actually came late to that Maguire-Sosa party. But the steroids did not enhance Barry's ability to put bat on ball solidly, nearly every single swing, bat on ball with the rarest of hand-eye coordination. Steroids didn't help that. And by the way, Barry did win 8 Gold Gloves, and he did steal 52 bases one year in Pittsburgh. That was pre-steroids, before he got big. But I must admit, Barry's postseason numbers never quite lived up to his regular seasons. In fact, by his standards, they're pretty sorry, except for that one great World Series he played in, when late in Game 6, I was there, with a 5-0 lead and a ring nearing his finger, Barry started clowning around during a late at-bat. Then Dusty Baker looked like he was celebrating prematurely. And those Rally Monkey Angels fought back, and they won 6-5. Then they won Game 7, and Barry Bonds wound up with 0 rings. Not goatish.